Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of me reading Grimm's Fairy Tales. Last time I read Little Red Cap, and this time we're going to read Cinderella. So, let's begin. Once upon a time, the wife of a certain rich man fell very ill, and as she felt her end drawing nigh, she called her only daughter to her bedside and said, "My dear child, be pious and good, and then the good God will work always to protect you, and I will look down upon you from heaven and think of you." Soon afterwards, she closed her eyes and died. Every day the maiden went to her mother's grave and wept over it, and she continued to be good and pious, but when the winter came, the snow made a white covering over the grave. And in the springtime, when the sun had withdrawn this covering, the father took to himself another wife. The wife brought home with her 2 daughters. They were beautiful and fair in the face, but treacherous and wicked at heart. Then an unfortunate era began in the poor stepchild's life. "Shall the stupid goose sit in the parlor with us?" said the 2 daughters. "They who would eat bread must earn it. Out with the kitchen maid!" So they took off her fine clothes and put upon her an old gray cloak, and gave her wooden shoes for her feet. "See how the once proud princess is decked out now," said they, and they led her mockingly into the kitchen. Then she was obliged to work hard from morning till night, and to go out early to fetch water, to make the fire, and cook and scour. The sisters treated her besides with every possible insult, derided her, and shook the peas and beans into the ashes, so that she had to pick them out again. At night, when she was tired, she had no bed to lie on, but was forced to sit in the ashes on the hearth, and because she looked dirty through this, they named her Cinderella. One day it happened that the father wanted to go to the fair, so he asked his 2 daughters what he should bring them. "Some beautiful dresses," said one. "Pearls and precious stones," replied the other. "But you, Cinderella," said he, "what will you have?" "The first bow, father, that knocks against your hat on your way homewards. Bring it off for me," she replied. So he bought the fine dresses and the pearls and precious stones for his 2 stepdaughters, and on his return, as he rode through a green thicket, a hazel bow touched his hat, which he broke off and took with him. As soon as he got home, he gave his stepdaughters what they had wished for, and to Cinderella he gave the hazel branch. She thanked him very much, and going to her mother's grave, she planted the branch on it, and wept so long that her tears fell and watered it, so that it grew and became a beautiful tree. Thrice a day Cinderella went beneath it to weep and pray, and each time a little white bird flew on the tree, and, if she wished aloud, then the little bird threw down to her whatever she wished for. After a time, it fell out that the king appointed a festival, which was to last 3 days, and to which all the beautiful maidens in the country were invited, from whom his son was to choose a bride. When the 2 stepdaughters heard that they might also appear, they were very glad, and, calling Cinderella, they said, "Comb our hair, brush our shoes, and fasten our buckles, for we are going to the festival at the king's palace." Cinderella obeyed, crying because she wished to go with them to dance, so she asked her stepmother whether she would allow her. "You, Cinderella," said she, "you are covered with dust and dirt. Will you go to the festival? You have no clothes or shoes, and how can you dance?" But, as she urged her request, the mother said at last, "I have now shaken into the ashes a tub full of beans. If you have picked them up again in 2 hours, you shall go." Then the maiden left the room, and went out at the back door into the garden, and called out, "You tame pigeons and doves, and all you birds of heaven, come and help me to gather the good beans into the tub, and the bad ones you may eat." Presently, in at the kitchen window came 2 white pigeons, and after them the doves, and soon all the birds under heaven flew, chirping in down upon the ashes. They then began, pick, 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 and gathered all the good seeds into the tub, and scarcely an hour had passed when all was completed, and the birds flew away again. Then the maiden took the tub to the stepmother, rejoicing at the thought that she might now go to the festival. But the stepmother said, "No, Cinderella, you have no clothes and cannot dance, and you will only be laughed at." As she began to cry, the stepmother said, "If you can pick up quite clean 2 tubs of beans which I throw amongst the ashes in 1 hour, you shall accompany them." And she thought to herself, "She will never manage it." As soon as the 2 tubs had been shot into the ashes, Cinderella went out at the back door into the garden and called out as before, "You tame pigeons and doves, and all you birds under heaven, come and help me to gather the good ones into the tubs, and the bad ones you may eat." Presently, in at the kitchen window came 2 white pigeons, and soon after them the doves, and soon all the birds under heaven flew chirping in down upon the ashes. They then began pick, 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 and gathered all the seeds into the tub, and scarcely had half an hour passed before all was picked up, and off they flew again. The maiden now took the tubs to the stepmother, rejoicing at the thought that she could go to the festival. But the mother said, "It does not help you a bit. You cannot go with us, for you have no clothes, and cannot dance. We should be ashamed of you." Thereupon she turned her back upon the maiden, and hastened away with her 2 proud daughters. As there was no one at home, Cinderella went to her mother's grave under the hazel tree, and said, "Rustle and shake yourself, dear tree, and silver and gold throw down to me." Then the bird threw down a dress of gold and silver, and silken slippers ornamented with silver. These Cinderella put on in great haste, and then she went to the ball. Her sisters and stepmother did not know her at all, and took her for some foreign princess, as she looked so beautiful in her golden dress. For of Cinderella they thought not but that she was sitting at home picking the beans out of the ashes. Presently the prince came up to her, and, taking her by the hand, led her to dance. He would not dance with anyone else, and even would not let go her hand, so that when anyone else asked her to dance, he said, "She is my partner." They danced till evening, when she wished to go home, but the prince said, "I will go with you, and see you safe," for he wanted to see to whom the maiden belonged. She flew away from him, however, and sprang into the pigeon house, so the prince waited till the father came, whom he told that the strange maiden had run into the pigeon house. Then the stepmother thought, "Could it be Cinderella?" And they brought an axe where the prince might cut open the door, but no one was found within. And when they came into the house, there lay Cinderella in her dirty clothes among the ashes, and an oil lamp was burning in the chimney. For she had jumped quickly out on the other side of the pigeon house, and had run to the hazel tree, where she had taken off her fine clothes and laid them on the grave, and the bird had taken them again. And afterwards she had put on her little gray cloak, and seated herself among the ashes in the kitchen. The next day, when the festival was renewed, and her stepmother and her sisters had set out again, Cinderella went to the hazel tree, and sang as before, "Rustle and shake yourself, dear tree, and silver and gold throw down to me." Then the bird threw down a much more splendid dress than the former, and when the maiden appeared at the ball, everyone was astonished at her beauty. The prince, however, who had waited till she came, took her hand and would dance with no one else, and if others came and asked, he replied as before, "She is my partner." As soon as evening came, she wished to depart, and the prince followed her, wanting to see into whose house she went. But she sprang away from him, and ran into the garden behind the house. Therein stood a fine, large tree, on which hung the most beautiful pears, and the boughs rustled as though a squirrel was among them. But the prince could not see whence the noise proceeded. He waited, however, till the father came, and told him, "The strange maiden has escaped from me, and I think she has climbed up into this tree." The father thought to himself, "Can it be Cinderella?" And, taking an axe, he chopped down the tree, but there was no one in it. When they went into the kitchen, there lay Cinderella among the ashes as before, for she had sprung down on the other side of the tree, And, having taken her beautiful clothes again to the bird upon the hazel tree, she had put on once more her old grey cloak. The third day, when her stepmother and her sisters had set out, Cinderella went again to her mother's grave and said, "Rustle and shake yourself, dear tree, and silver and gold throw down to me." Then the bird threw down to her a dress which was more splendid and glittering than she had ever had before, and the slippers were of pure gold. When she arrived at the ball, they knew not what to say for wonderment, and the prince danced with her alone, as at first, and replied to everyone who asked her hand, "She is my partner." As soon as evening came, she wished to go, and as the prince followed her, she ran away so quickly that he could not overtake her. But he had contrived a stratagem, and spread the whole way with pitch, so that it happened as the maiden ran that her slipper came off. The prince took it up and saw it was small and graceful, and of pure gold. So the following morning he went with it to the father and said, "My bride shall be no other than she whose foot this golden slipper fits." The two sisters were glad of this, for they had beautiful feet, and the elder went with it to her chamber to try it on, while her mother stood by. She could not, however, get her great toe into it, and the shoe was much too small, but the mother, reaching a knife, said, "Cut off your toe, for if you are queen, you need not go any longer on foot." The maiden cut it off, and squeezed her foot into the shoe, and concealing the pain she felt, went to the prince. Then he placed her as his bride upon his horse, and rode off, and as they passed by the grave, there sat two little doves upon the hazel tree, singing, "Backwards peep, there's blood upon the shoe. The shoe's too small, and she behind is not the bride for you." Then the prince looked behind and saw the blood flowing, so he turned his horse back and took the false bride home again, saying she was not the right one. Then the other sister must needs fit on the shoe, so she went to the chamber and got her toes nicely into the shoe, but the heel was too large. The mother, reaching a knife, said, "Cut off a piece of your heel, for when you become queen you need not go any longer on foot." She cut a piece off her heel, squeezed her foot into the shoe, and concealing the pain she felt, went to the prince. Then he put her upon his horse as his bride, and rode off, and as they passed the hazel tree, there sat two little doves, who sang, backwards peep, there's blood upon the shoe. The shoe's too small, and she behind is not the bride for you." Then he looked behind and saw the blood trickling from her shoe, and that the stocking was dyed quite red. So he turned his horse back, and took the false bride home again, saying, "Neither is this one the right maiden. Have you no other daughter?" "No," replied the father, "except little Cinderella, daughter of my deceased wife, who cannot possibly be the bride." The prince asked that she might be fetched, but the stepmother said, "Oh no, she is much too dirty. I dare not let her be seen." But the prince would have his way, so Cinderella was called, and she, first washing her hands and face, went in and curtsied to the prince, who gave her the golden shoe. Cinderella sat down on a stool, and taking off her heavy wooden shoes, put on the slipper, which fitted her to a shade. And, as she stood up, the prince looked her in the face, and recognizing the beautiful maiden with whom he had danced, exclaimed, "This is my true bride." The stepmother and the two sisters were amazed and white with rage, but the prince took Cinderella upon his horse and rode away, and as they came up to the hazel tree, the two little white doves sang, backwards peep, there's no blood on the shoe. It fits so nice, and she behind is the true bride for you." And as they finished, they flew down and lighted upon Cinderella's shoulders, and there they remained, and the wedding was celebrated with great festivities, and the two sisters were smitten with blindness as a punishment for their wickedness. The end.